So Deepa Thomas is a research associate at the University of Texas, working on the Alice experiment. She did her master's in India and her PhD at Utrecht University, and she is an ex-junior representative of the Alice collaboration. So welcome, Deepa. Please can you introduce yourself to the group?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Deepa Thomas. As Martha already mentioned, I'm a research associate at UT Austin in US, and I work at in the Alice experiment. I joined the experiment as a PhD student. I'm continuing since 2009, so it's been a long time I'm in the experiment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Dominik Mitzel. He did his PhD at the University of Heidelberg, working on charm physics at the LHCb experiment. He received the LHCb Thesis Award for his work during his PhD. He was a CERN fellow, and he is now convener of the charm physics working group at LHCb. Welcome, Dominik.
Hello. Many thanks for inviting me, for having me today. I'm really looking forward for the event. So as Martha said, I did my PhD in Heidelberg, and then I moved to CERN for 3 years as a fellow and then as a postdoc. Now I'm back in Germany at the University of Dortmund, where I'm setting up my junior research group at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Eluned Smith, who is also a member of the LHCb collaboration. She did her PhD thesis at Imperial College London on rare decays of beauty mesons. She did a postdoc at Aachen in Germany, and she is now a fellow at the University of Zurich and convener of the Rare Decays Working Group at LHCb.
Yeah, I'm Eluned. I'm very happy to be here. I've been at LHCb since 2013. As Martha said, I did a postdoc first of all in Germany, then I did a fellowship in Zurich, and I will be shortly moving on to a professorship position.
Thank you. So next, Erica Brondolin is an applied scientist at CERN on the CMS experiment. Her research is in software event reconstruction. She did her PhD at Vienna in Austria on track reconstruction on CMS for high luminosity LHC. Erica, please go ahead.
I am Erica Brondolin, and I've been working the CMS experiment. I have done my PhD thesis in Vienna, and then I moved to CERN for an applied fellowship. And now I am applied staff, always in CMS. Thanks.
Thank you. So our next panelist is Fernando Flor, who is a postdoc at Yale University on the Alice experiment. He did his PhD at the University of Houston, also on Alice. Fernando, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of this. As Martha said, I am currently a postdoc fellow here at Yale University, and I recently defended my thesis back in February, and the actual degree was awarded maybe about a week ago from University of Houston, but I did start out working at Elise in 2018, and I'm still part of Elise now. I guess while I was in Elise, I also had the opportunity of being a junior representative for the Elise collaboration. And I guess at some point in the PhD, I also traveled to University of Strasbourg during a research grant in which I was also doing work for Elise. So that's about it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So next we have Patricia McBride, who is also on the CMS experiment. She is the spokesperson elect of the CMS experiment, and she was elected in February this year. She did her PhD at Yale and a postdoc at Harvard, and also worked at Fermilab. Patricia, please.
Hi, I think it's been probably the longest time since I was a graduate student of anyone here, but I did my PhD at Yale on a small experiment with about 8 people in a fixed target experiment looking for charm in neutron proton collisions. So that was a long time ago. I've since done a lot of work in very international settings in many different places. I've had a lot of experience in working in computing, software, building detectors. And now I'm here. I've been at Fermilab for a long time, but I've been stationed at CERN for a few years, and I will be starting as spokesperson in a few months. And it's nice to see all of you, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thanks.
Okay, and finally, our final panelist is Sourav Sen. Sourav did his PhD on the ATLAS experiment at Duke University. He then left experimental particle physics to become a research scientist in the machine learning team at Upstart. So hopefully he can give us a bit of a perspective on leaving the field as well. Sourav.
I'm Sara. I did my PhD in 2020 from Duke in the ATLAS collaboration. And after that, I moved to industry. So I work in a fintech company called Upstart as a machine learning research scientist. Yeah, and thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you. Okay, so as I said, I've got some questions which I'm going to direct to the panelists. Panelists, I will probably direct a question to like an individual person, but if anyone else has wants to answer or wants to comment, please like raise your hand and then I will invite you to speak. So the first question is directed to Erica, please. What is generally expected of PhD students and what should they aim to achieve?
Thanks. Yeah, this is quite a tough question. I'd say I've collected the 3 main points in terms of mostly soft skills that I would like to share with you. So first of all, it's very important to me about communication, both in communicating your results or the problems that you're facing, but also in terms of communicating with people. So in particular with the supervisor or the person that is in charge of your work. So for the results and for the problem, it's really important that you are interested in your job. So you really try to understand and question the methodology that you use, understand the results, and maybe go a little bit more in deep to understand the details of these results. But also then you have to be able to communicate, so to extract the main ingredients and then put them together in a kind of comprehensive overview when you show it to other people. On the communication part, I think with the people, it's very important that you talk with your supervisor about the results that you want to achieve with your project and also kind of the timeline. So the difficult part here is balancing the need of help. So you have to ask from time to time the help from the supervisor, but at the same time, you also have to solve problem yourself. You are not a student at the university anymore. At the PhD level, one thinks and expects that you are independent. On the second side, the second soft skill that, at least in my case, was very important was creating a support network. And this was because my personal experience, my supervisor was not directly involved in CMS. So I had really to build up the supporting network that I needed for guidance, for help. And this you can do in many ways. You can do it at conference, you can do it in your working group, you can do it for different, doctor schools and so on. And that, I would say, that is very important, not only for your project, but also for your career, because this kind of brings together a set of people that it's important for your network in general. The last point that I have here listed to mention is about building, becoming an expert in your topic. And that's quite expected, that you not only get the technical skills, but also kind of a leading skills. So you take ownership, first of all, of your project, of what you're doing and what you want your project will become. And then also you get the small leading roles, for example, in your own group or in collaboration as well. I think this kind of were the things that I wanted to share with you.
Have you had or been a mentor during your research career, and how to build a good relationship with your mentor, and how did you find your mentor? So Eluned, I think you've been involved in mentorship scheme before, so would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, so so for me personally, in terms of formal mentorship schemes, I have been a mentor. I've never been a mentee on a mentorship scheme, but that was mainly because there was nothing obvious available to me. I think they're really valuable. My experience, first of all, is being kind of formal mentor. I mean, I think you, so I think through being a mentor, I can also hopefully see, I think, the value for also a mentee, in the sense that you have, you know, really this ability to guide somebody who's younger than you, but really see, you know, their problems through the lens of kind of a bit more distance and experience, and also kind of be a bit of a sanity check sometimes. I think it's very easy when you're, particularly when you're a PhD, to very, you know, to feel overwhelmed, to have a slight, you can't know really what, you know, it's very hard to have things in perspective because you maybe don't have the experience to put things into perspective either. So I think that's also a really valuable thing that an older mentor can kind of, especially in the formal scheme, kind of help you with. And the advantage of these formal schemes, of course, also you can go to the mentor and say, these are some specific things that I would like to work on, and then, you know, you can tackle this together. So I think with a formal mentorship scheme, that is one thing which is very valuable. The second thing is kind of informal mentorship, which is, you know, also a little bit the point with the previous question in terms of support networks. For me personally, I struggle to, so I think a mentorship relationship has to be, it can't be an artificial relationship. It has to be something which comes naturally. At least for me, I struggle to kind of really, you know, kind of build something out of nothing and then ask them to be my mentor in an informal way. However, I have had really, really valuable mentorship of my career to date. And this has always come from people who, for whatever reason, I've had a shared experience with. So this is either because I've worked with them or because we have some shared background. For example, other women have often been very valuable mentors for me personally, or we've met through some other channels. But I think it's really important, basically, to, you know, you need to have a relationship with a mentor who you would get on with anyway, because I think, you know, to have that informal relationship, yeah, it can't be strained. And I also think it's important to have, like, you know, if you can, yes, then you can have people who are more senior, perhaps someone you work with, perhaps your boss, that's also very valuable, your supervisor, if you happen to have a good relationship. But also, you know, people are also more your own age, also can be an invaluable resource in that sense. So I think, you know, in terms of building a relationship, it is important to, yeah, not to force it, but to really kind of, you know, when you have the opportunity to spend time or experience with somebody who's a bit more senior, figure out who, you know, you have maybe a good rapport with, and kind of, you know, people are really happy if you ask their opinion. I think it's also a flattery thing. So often if you then ask somebody's opinion, they'll be very happy to give it. And that's a way to kind of then consolidate the fact that it's kind of a mentor-mentee relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. Please, Deepa.
Yeah, I fully agree with Eluned that the relationship should be natural. It's not something where they say, oh, I want a mentee. From my experience, I've had mentorship surprisingly from people, I mean, not as in a planned way. I would ask for some suggestion, and it turned out that they would be a good mentor. So I think it's important to talk to many people and share your experience and I guess make connections. especially when you're in a collaboration. To an extent, it's easy, and find people who have shared your experience. Maybe it doesn't have to be older people, but also postdocs at different career stages, and it really helps. It's important to keep trying throughout your career to find different people who can be your mentor. And it's not something that you can plan for it, because I've been asked by several students, how can I find a mentor? And I don't think you can go look out for it. It's a job where you can go and say, find a mentor, but it just happens accidentally. So you have to keep trying.
Thank you, Deepa. I should mention, though, that we do have a LHC mentorship scheme, which is more of a formal thing, which a lot of the people that have organised this event also organised. So look out for that as well. Patricia, yes, please.
So I didn't have the experience of having a formal mentor in a formal scheme during my career, but certainly over the career, there have been people, I think, as the previous speaker said, that it's, they kind of happen naturally. People that some senior people, some peer groups who I found it easy to talk about when there were stressful situations. So some of those people have stayed with me as a mentor or as an advisor over my whole career, and that I found very, very helpful. Of course, not everybody stays in the field or stays with you as a mentor, but I think that some of these relationships you establish as a student or as a postdoc can actually be helpful throughout your career, whatever you're doing. I think part of for coming as someone who mentors several people, it is flattering to be asked, and it's flattering to have, it's good for this kind of conversations to have me as sort of working in the management of one of the experiments, to be able to have sort of weekly or monthly contact with people. Is I find it very rewarding, and I'm happy to take on this role, though of course it doesn't, you can't be a formal mentor to thousands of people, but it is a very rewarding thing, and I think it helps to look for someone who listens to you. Lots of people will give you advice, but you also want to have as a mentor someone who's listening to what your concerns are or what your plans are. And the relationship to a mentor is good for looking for the long-term view, not just how am I going to, it can be how am I going to get my job done this week, but it really can help you step back and think about where you want to be next year, or how you want to get you balance all the things that are on your plate. So look for people that bring that to you, and how do you plan for the long term?
Okay, thank you for your answer. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next question now. Ben, how did you choose the career paths when you were about to finish up your PhD? So I guess you're doing this now, or have done quite recently, be it in academia or in a corporate job.
Yeah, a really good question. And I mean, I should preface this with, I have not chosen a specific career path yet, but I think I'm in an interesting situation to provide an answer here, in that this is, first of all, something that I've been thinking about for, well, a couple of years now, and not even just a couple of years, but before I even started my PhD. So I think it's important to have like a rough, not necessarily plan, but guide of places you'd be happy seeing yourself and what you actually want to do, as opposed to trying to follow a path that is perhaps predefined or a common path in your field, right? It's pretty standard for people in our field to do your undergrad in physics or engineering, and then you continue on and if you do good research, which I'm sure all of us have done, then, well, you get asked to do a master's or a PhD. And then at some point during the PhD, somebody or multiple people ask you to stay on and continue and do a postdoc. And you're like, wow, this is great. I'm getting so many offers. Like, this is awesome. Let's keep this up, right? But if you, I think it's good to take the time to not necessarily just say yes to all of those offers. So for me, like, this started back when I was doing my master's. I wanted to do a master's, and then I had offers to continue and do a PhD. And I wanted to just stop and take a break, pursue some of my other interests, and make sure I really wanted to do a PhD. And so I'm really passionate about teaching and communication. And so I worked as an instructor for a year at my university, and then decided to pursue the PhD. And so then, okay, then I'm doing my PhD. That can sort of delay that decision now. This PhD is a long path. I really wanted to focus on that for the first couple of years. And it's not to say I'm not focusing on that anymore. But then about halfway through, I started thinking, okay, well, now where do I see myself moving forward, and how can what I'm doing during my PhD help me with that? And that goes with, I mean, well, you want to be thinking about that even as you go into your PhD, but what do I want to start researching in terms of positions I can apply for? And so, of course, we're halfway through your PhD, you get people encouraging you to do postdocs or continue on in the fields. But I think it's important to think what are you most interested in, and then start exploring jobs. And so about this time, well, something like September or so, a year ago, near the last year of your PhD, right as that's starting, that's when people really start ramping up postdoc applications, right? Especially in North America, where these applications tend to be like a year in advance, a lot of the time, of when you're going to be starting the position. And so first of all, I basically was like, okay, I'm not going to apply for any of these, because if I get offers, it'll probably come sooner than other jobs, and I don't want to put myself in the position of having to delay something that I might want to be not necessarily want to do without comparing it to other options. And so I really thought about what I enjoy the most, and then just targeted some core positions in completely different type things that I am interested in. So I applied to some positions in the Canadian government and science policy. I applied to teaching professor positions. I applied to a single postdoc, and I applied to outreach and science communication positions. And so I spent a lot of time in November, December, and January applying to just these targeted positions, and then that was it. I didn't spend time applying for any more positions after that, and now I'm just focusing on my PhD and sort of waiting to see what comes to me. And so because I've been comfortable with taking this slow and not trying to rush into a job, I'm comfortable continue waiting. And if I don't get any of these offers, I've had multiple interviews for all of these types of positions, and if none of them work out, then that's okay. Once I'm done my PhD in September, I'll take 4 months to really target more of these positions, and then I'll apply to more postdocs and more teaching positions and have more good comparisons. So I think really my key point is that there's no rush. Obviously, sometimes there are monetary concerns, but you can always go and get a job that a temporary job to make money while you're trying to really decide what you want to pursue. And so take your time. Don't just follow the path that maybe people are encouraging you to follow, but try and really think about what you want to be doing, and then take the time to target those positions.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks for that perspective. I think it's important also to know that what you do now is not necessarily what you need to do for the rest of your career. Like, people do a lot of different things. And also you might not get the first postdoc that you apply for. So and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So you might have to put in several applications, and that's okay. And good luck in your applications as well. Fernando, I wonder if you had anything to comment on this, seeing as you maybe finished and were in this position quite recently.
Yeah, so I guess for me, my situation was a little bit of a special case, because prior to me completing the PhD, I had already been awarded a research grant. So it was almost as if I had already kind of left myself with no choice. but to continue into, I guess, academia and continue pursuing what I currently did. But I did want to preface this that it wasn't something that just spontaneously happened. This was something that I did sit down with my PhD supervisor several times, probably maybe a year and a half leading to the completion of the thesis, in which we actually basically sat down and discussed what I wanted to do with my career with respect to staying in academia, and B, what they thought was basically a plausible path that I could follow. So, I mean, it took a little bit of planning ahead of time, but I would say that, having a job prior to finishing your PhD is, it's not the worst case scenario. So it was actually pretty nice to already have something lined up. And I guess for me, it was easier that way, because then I didn't have to fumble between doing different applications at different places, and then at the same time worry about perhaps not having job placement while trying to defend the PhD and, meeting all these deadlines. So I think, this was for me somewhat of a godsend that I was able to just, focus on completing the PhD simply because I already had a position lined up on my way.
That's really interesting to hear. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next question now. So Sourav, I wonder if you could tell us a bit about your transition from academia into industry. So what skills did you develop while you were at CERN in order to make this transition? And what was the transition like? And do you have any general tips?
I sort of decided to switch to industry in my final year, like back in 2020. So I applied to different places. So went through some interview rounds, and so before I got a job offer, and it was like too close to my PhD defense, so I sort of accepted it and just defended my thesis, and that's where I'm working now. It was a little difficult, like being like in HEPEX while looking for industry jobs. So the kind of industry jobs I was looking for were mostly in data science, machine learning. So some of the skill sets overlap with what we do at LHC experiments, like the general data analysis, but the software stack that we use. So people working at CERN sort of tend to use software packages which are maybe not the ones used in industry. So that was something I had to pick up myself on top of whatever I was doing in my PhD. So one of my tips is like, if you are like, if you have made up your mind to sort of switch to industry in like data science, machine learning, quant jobs, you should sort of try to use these like whatever industry software stacks in your workflow, if possible, like in your daily research. If not, like just do it in like some kind of side projects or in open source projects, because otherwise it's going to be sort of hard to transition right away from HEPEX to industry jobs, like just to get the interviews, to clear them, or to even work after you start your work. Apart from that, I would say you should definitely. So one thing I sort of lacked when I decided to move to industry was I did not know. So before this, I was always in academia. Like I went for my undergrads, I went to in India, I went to a basic science university, so I didn't know anyone who went for industry jobs. Here also, I was doing a physics PhDs, and I didn't know people from industry or other engineering departments who tend to go to industry jobs. So I had to sort of make network, sort of make connections, because that's very important if you want to switch to industry, especially if you want to get your first job from academia. So I would say, like, if possible, I'm sure like CERN has a few events, like, I don't know, even if wherever you are, if there are like job fairs or other industry events, if you have time, just try to go there, talk to people, and make connections. So that's going to help. Even like, yeah, that definitely help in at least getting interviews from companies. So that's my, I guess, advice on this.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that answer. I think that's a good point about networking. Yeah, we do have a LHC career networking event, for example, and the alumni network, where you can maybe find people that have gone into industry. Okay, so a similar question, but for one of our postdocs. Fernando, what were the differences in responsibilities in your day-to-day work between the PhD and the postdoc? And do you have any advice on how to make this transition?
Sure. So I guess since it's two parts, I'll start with the first. I think the most obvious difference between being a PhD student and then transitioning into postdoc is that you no longer have that pending task of completing the thesis looming over your head, and that, you know, allows you to maybe get a better night's sleep day to day. But assuming, I mean, after that, I guess like one thing that like is a big difference is that from the moment that you, I guess, complete the PhD, it's somewhat already accepted that you're an independent researcher, and that you can, in principle, fulfill the duties to their fullest, simply because people have seen that you've completed a level of research and that you have that level of expertise now, like underneath your belt, and that you can actually do that. And this is also, I mean, I guess, like I was saying, stemming from the fact that the thesis has been completed. Secondly, I guess, building up from the experience of the PhD, you clearly already have a network built up of collaborators and people and a skill set that you have already applied. So you no longer have to start from the bottom. You already have a skill set built up that you can build off of, which is extremely robust. And that basically makes it so that when you take on new tasks or new duties, you don't have to start from scratch. You're basically already above this little step function that you have to get through in order to get a task done. And I guess like a big other, I guess, difference is that the duties that you can take on, I guess, while you're already a postdoc, stem beyond a single topic in your thesis or a single service task, much like the ones that we perform when we're students. So you somewhat have now a broader or a wider scope of the field that no longer just focuses on, like I was saying, one topic, but on the actual progression of the field, be it as a researcher, as an educator, or maybe even as a bureaucrat, as you start, you know, becoming part of like certain committees or being a part of certain, I guess, boards in which now you have like your foot in the table. And I think that, you know, some people that are a part of the research, the junior scientist committees here have already seen that that's like a big part of, I guess, becoming maybe a group leader or a senior mentor in the experiments. And I guess like another thing is that one thing that I've noticed is that now I have a bigger sense of freedom as to who I collaborate with, and that could actually stem from beyond people just in my experiments. So now I can go to, say, somebody that's in the math department or somebody that's in the engineering department, and we can actually start discussing projects that could potentially not necessarily have a direct application into the experiment itself, but maybe introduce different techniques that we can apply and maybe contribute to a paper that is independent from the research that one is actually doing, you know, as a collaborator in an experiment. So I guess, like, in order to, what I would say, transition easily from the PhD to the postdoc, what I just suggest is that toward the tail end of the PhD, as you already have all of your research done and are working on your manuscript, see if you maybe have the chance of taking additional duties that stem beyond just the scope of your PhD topic or your service task. See if you can get involved with certain committees. See if you can become a junior representative for your collaboration, or maybe within your own institute, you could serve any committee that represents the graduate students. That way you get used to dealing with a different level of, I guess, conversation within your institute or the collaboration. And also see if you can, I mean, and this goes without saying, I'm sure a lot of people are already involved with like outreach or pedagogical sort of initiatives within your collaboration or your institute. That way you also start already getting used to becoming an educator toward the community and not just getting used to speaking a technical language as we do during our collaboration meetings. That way your scientific communication skills are already starting to get developed early on in your career. And then I guess lastly is, like I was saying, try to sit down with your supervisor at some point leading to your graduation. Like I was saying, maybe about a year prior to your projected graduation date, sorry. And that way you start actually discussing with them what they believe could potentially be a good placing for you in the future, and you letting them know where it would be that you would like to be in the future. And the last one is see if you can volunteer with your group leader or with your supervisor to contribute to the grant writing process, because I believe that that's like a big thing that, you know, distinguishes being a student and then being an independent researcher, is that you yourself have to write these proposals, which turn out to be quite lengthy, and the process turns out to be quite lengthy. So you just make sure that you start getting familiar with what goes into it, beyond just, you know, the project outline. I mean, there are certain things in which you have to start working on budgeting, and you have to start working on things that as a student you don't really have to worry about because somebody else might already be doing that for you. So just, you know, try to make it so that you allow yourself to sort of bloom into a quote unquote like Swiss Army knife. That way, once you get to the postdoc, you're already set to be able to take on any additional duties. But you know, also don't burn yourself out. So find a nice little balance, I would say.
Thank you. That was a good and comprehensive answer, and highlighted the importance of kind of doing other activities during your PhD as well. Would any of the other panelists like to comment on this question about the transition between a PhD and a postdoc? Eluned?
Yeah, I just had one extra comment on what Fernando said, but so I agree. I think this shit's very useful. I would though stress also that I think, at least from my experience when looking to hire postdocs, I think there is also an understanding that if it's a postdoc who's straight out of a PhD, that you may not yet have had the time, space, resource to, you know, prepare yourself for this change, and that it is actually that, you know, if you have I think it's also important to make sure that you have a supportive group for your postdoc, because then even if you haven't been able to, so for me personally, I didn't do any preparation from PhD to postdoc, but, you know, having an environment where then you had that support for the first X number of months when you're transitioning, then also made that a lot easier. So I think that's also, you know, when you're looking for where your postdoc is, looking for, same as with the PhD supervisor, right? Looking for what kind of support you get is also, can also make that transition easier. Easier.
Yeah, that's good advice. I think Fernando agrees. Thank you. Okay, so talking about the kind of extra responsibilities that you might have as postdoc, I'm going to direct the next question to Deepa. In your opinion, what is the best way to strike the right balance for supervising a PhD student?
It's a tough question because I think supervising a PhD student, I feel it's a big responsibility because it's a make or break of a student's 5 years, 4 to 5 years, depending on which country you're in. So it's a pretty serious business. And what I found out was I supervised few students, 3 to 4 during my last postdoc and research associate position. And I found is that no two students are same. I mean, they're pretty different. So you need to have an approach that fits individual. So there is no one fit all approach. So what I do is observe the student at the beginning for 1 to 2 months and see how they work and what kind of students they are. Especially, for example, some students get stressed out, especially in the beginning, they get overwhelmed. So you need to see how and give task or weekly work so that they feel eased into the job, while some students seem to be pretty cool. And also as it progresses, what I observed as some students work well when there are deadlines or the most stressful environment, while some do not work well when there's too much stress. So you might have to plan the work accordingly. But this is mostly in the first year, I would say, first 1 or 2 years. And then the goal is, of course, for the PhD student to gain all the skills that the question was, right? That the first question and the first answer was pretty elaborate on what skills you need to develop and achieve by the end of the PhD. So as a supervisor, my goal is to ensure that the PhD student reaches that at the end. So it's a journey. So what you need is to check if the student needs constant help or somebody who's more independent. And if it's a student who needs constant help, then get them to be independent as they go. But if it's a student who prefers to find out answer themselves, but then get stuck, but they don't come to the advisor because they think they have to find the answer themselves, then you need to check on them. So my strategy is usually to have a weekly meeting just to see the progress, but not to with the goal of having results every week, but to ensure that they don't get lost and to gauge how things are going. And then at the end, to ensure that they are independent and own their project and they can defend. So have them present frequently, so you know if they are they've understood the topic, because most likely, I think most of the LHC experiments now, the PhD students join, the topic is given to them. They don't look for a project to find what they want to do, but rather the topic is given to them by the advisor. So it's important that the student at some point owns the topic and makes it themselves. And that's what keeps them exciting and engaged with the topic. Otherwise, they seem to get lost. So so keeping all that into account, the supervision has to be fine-tuned. So I think my analogy is, so in India, when you go to a driving school, at the beginning, the student is only given the steering, but all the control is with the co-passenger. But then as maybe second or midway, you become a passenger behind, and you just observe and see how the student drives and just give advice if the student is losing track or going off track, but then drives themselves. So I think that's the analogy that I would use and then go with.
Okay, nice analogy, thank you. Okay, nice analogy, thank you. Any of our other panelists want to comment on their experience of supervising PhD students?
I would maybe just completely echo what Deepa just said. I mean, it's exactly this point that every student is so individual, and I think I hadn't appreciated quite how important it is that you understand type of student that you have and how they stay motivated can be very different. How they stay motivated and on track is very different for each student. So yeah, I just agree with what Deepa said. But
yeah, thank you. Okay, so I can move on to the next question. Dominik, in such a large scale experiment, how do you get visibility for your work?
Yeah, thanks a lot for the question. I think visibility is really a key for the success in academia. If you're working in such a big collaboration, like at CERN, of more than 1,000 members. And because you have that pyramid-like structure, but you have a lot of students, and then you have fewer positions for PhDs, and then fewer positions for postdoc, and then at the very end, only just very few positions left for a permanent position. So I think the basis to get visibility is, of course, that you need to do excellent work, unique work, innovative work. So for the moment, let's assume we all do excellent work, because even then, in that case, you cannot take for granted, right, that you get the credit that you deserve for the work that you do. So the bad news is, I think you cannot control everything. So the truth is that also there's a bit of luck to be in the right moment, the right place, to know the right people at the right time. But I think there are certainly some factors that you can also control, and you try to actively increase the chances to get the visibility that you deserve. So focusing on that, one advice that I would have is don't be shy and be proactive. Meaning that if you get the chance to present your work, then make use of it in any form. Meaning, while starting from presenting your work at the university, but that of course is not so helpful in terms of visibility in the collaboration, but then you can practice and try to defend and present what you're working on in, we call that working groups. In LHCB, we have that structure that we have expert groups, and you can start presenting the work to a wider audience of experts in the collaboration, so that people really can associate the work you do with your face and your name. And then, of course, also at the later stage, go to conferences, workshops, present poster, for example, give talks about your specific topic. Yeah, when I know that it's not always easy to decide what you want to work on as a PhD, but if you have some freedom, I think it's to make sure that what you're working on has some relevance also for a wider, for the collaboration as a whole. Meaning that when you are working on a more technical aspect, you can, for example, choose a topic that might, for example, improve the performance of the detector in a certain area. And then if this is relevant for a wider audience, this will give you a much more visibility than if you're working on something specifically only useful for yourself. Then what I would also recommend is to take roles in the collaboration which have some sort of responsibility, because that also comes with visibility. In the sense that if you take roles with responsibility, there is also a way to get a big network of people that support you. Because this is my next big point. I think in the big collaboration, getting visibility is very much related to having a network of people that support you. Yeah, and that network, that can be many people. For example, it can be peers, other students. Of course, it can be your supervisor. It can be conveners of the working groups in the collaboration. And then at some point also the management in the collaboration. Because if you get that network, then this is basically the way that opens opportunities, how to get conference talks, how to present at very important collaboration meetings, and these kind of things. Yeah, having that said, what did I took some notes. Yeah, don't be shy. Introduce yourself to people that may be relevant for your field of work. Ask for coffee breaks, join some more workshops, try to get involved in discussions, speak up in discussions. And if you maybe are not so feeling so well with approaching people, there are also actually some events that are offered by collaborations. I think somebody already mentioned it, Marta, that we have that dedicated mentoring program. We have also in LHCB, for example, something which is called Next Coffee With, where you get randomly associated to a person and you can start chatting and get to know new people. We have a newcomer event We have a starter kit where you get to know other students and many more. And I think all these programs then help you to set that network, which is then really the basis to get the visibility later in the collaboration.
Okay, thank you, Dominik. That was a very comprehensive answer. Okay, thank you, Dominik. That was a very comprehensive answer. Would any of the other panelists like to comment on that? Erica, please go ahead.
Summarizing everything, I just would like to add that I think what is important is that you show the interest in what the other people think about your job, in the possible advice that they can give to your project and so on, and also to their job themselves, which is kind of part of the entire networking. So just go in there and as Dominik said, if you're shy, you can also, and if you're more introvert, you can also just send an email. There are multiple channels right now that allows also the more introverts people to do a type of networking that is maybe not the classical one. But yeah.
Good point, thank you. I think networking has come up quite a few times in today's discussion. Okay, so I'm going to ask another question. Patricia, please can you tell us what steps do you recommend for getting a permanent position in academia?
Yeah, well, one is not to do what I did, which was a fairly roundabout way, but I didn't always follow everyone's advice, but somehow I'm still in particle physics and happily in particle physics. So I guess my first advice, which goes along a little bit with what was just discussed, is, always be curious and always lead with the science when you're talking about this. When you're looking for a job in academia, you want to be able to lead your own research effort. So you think about what things you need to do to gain the skills you need to be able to do that, and also to convince the colleagues at the institution where you're applying that you are ready to do that, and you're ready to do that as an independent researcher. So one is that you should, in your current jobs, do your best to make sure that what you're working on is successful. And if you find that you're having difficulty or that the project is having difficulty, that you have this network that we've talked about many times to find a way to help with the situation, and not get discouraged, because I think particularly in the LHC experiments, we're all interconnected. So and we're all looking for the success of the physics program, but also the success of all the individuals. So other piece of advice when you're getting started is know your strengths. This is something, it's a lifelong journey to find what your strengths are today, or what you learn about that. But think about that when you're planning your career, about what you like to do, but also what you're good at, and try to steer in those kinds of directions. You will want to get leadership experience and that comes in many different ways, whether it's technical leadership on a project, on a leadership in the analysis or some piece of the analysis. It's not always just being the convener. The convener does, I think, was brought up, it brings you a support network and brings you maybe more visibility. But also you can be a leader in other ways in doing outreach, taking some independent action that's more volunteering, or something that's maybe not quite in what's been assigned to you. I think you think early on about how you put together a packet that when you come down to applying for jobs or interviewing for jobs, that it's putting your best self forward. So that's starting early and updating often what your CV or resume looks like, giving talks at all levels, and in your working groups to your peer group, but and work with your supervisor or mentor, or how to get a few seminars at other institutions. So you're used to talking at in a broader audience with people that may not be familiar at all with what you're working on. And then also to get, when it comes to an academic job, you're going to be wanting to teach, but you'll also be asked to give colloquia, which are much more broad and much more, almost closer to outreach. So it's sort of outreach to the scientific community. So it's being a good communicator is something I think it's been brought up many times. This is really important to be able to talk not only about the depth of your work and the technical part of your work, but also why it's important. I think one of the ways you get that experience is going to conferences. This has been much more difficult over COVID, but target the conferences maybe a year out, maybe even 2 years out, about what you're working on and where is an opportunity to give a poster or a talk, so you can get out to a conference and meet people who are doing similar things to you, and get a chance to hopefully be able to give a seminar for them. I think also be interested in the broader field, not just in what's going on in the LHC, but what's going on in physics in general. Understand a little bit about the accelerator. Read a lot about how all of the field of physics fits together, and spend a little bit of time doing that. Because when it comes to doing an interview, particularly in academia, people are going to want you to be interested in what they're doing. You don't need to be the expert and try to show that you know more than they do, but to be genuinely curious about what they're doing, and to get them to show you and teach you. Because I think it's something that at CERN, we are all in the same community, but when you're going to an academic position outside, you're in a community which does a lot of broader activities, and quantum or nuclear or AMO or astrophysics. Be aware of what's going on in the rest of the field. And when it comes down to interviewing, this is where your mentor team can be really helpful in going over what it's like to be in an interview. I think there's many things that you've probably been in seminars where they talk about how to prepare your CV, but how to prepare an interview and practice. What you want to say, what's the why you want to have this job. When they're interviewing you, they're looking at, do I want to be with this person for the next 30 years and doing research with them or having lunch with them? So they want to see you're engaged and that you're genuinely interested in what you're doing and in what they're doing. It's important to also take, some time to talk about it with your friends and your mentor team about what's important to you, about the life balance, about where you want to live, where, how it's close to your family, you want an adventure to go someplace else, what's important to you about the institution that you're working with. If it's a teaching institution, what kind of students you want to be looking at. You can apply broadly, but if there are certain things are not a good match for you, maybe that's not where to put all your emphasis. So anyway, that's a long sort of winding road, but there's no correct path to this. And I think, as I said, you have to know yourself, and you have to know how to express what you're interested in the packet they're going to receive, which is sometimes a piece of paper, and to get you through that first cut is depends on your networking, and it depends on how well you can explain what it is that you're excited about.
Thank you. Thanks for that valuable insights. Okay, so we have 8 minutes left until the break. So I'm going to be quite strict and invite each panelist to talk for only 1 minute on any final comments that you might have. And also maybe you can quickly answer the question, what is the main thing that you wish you knew when you're a PhD student or when you're a postdoc? So yeah, just 1 minute each, please. Ben, would you like to go first?
Sure. Okay. So I'll try and make 2 quick points. One of them is basically an expansion of what has been talked about, in that get involved in things that are not just your own project. And so that's not necessarily being on committees, but just, go to events, go to your weekly collaboration meeting, go to the collaboration update, like the Atlas Weekly is the Atlas version of that, for example. Attend the collaboration meetings that happen when you can, or at least virtually. Just be aware of what's going on in the collaboration to open up opportunities to yourself. And don't spend too much time on unnecessary work. And so, maybe you'll have something that somebody tells you to do, and like, okay, we need to make this check as soon as possible. Well, you think about it a little bit. Do we really need to make this check in full detail, or is it something that you can just do quickly and then the check is done? Yeah, so I'll leave it at that to be quick.
Thank you. Sorry for rushing. Deepa, would you like to go next? Any final comments?
Mentors, find mentors. I think that's one of the very key thing. Reach out to as many people, because the experiences of every individual are different, and you never know what fits, because to whether you would be in academics, if you want to find a faculty position, the path is very individualistic. So you need to know as many experiences from different people. So find as many mentors as possible to get. That's my biggest advice.
Thank you. Dominik, any final comments?
For me, it would have been good to know that it's absolutely not needed to know everything. So when I arrived at CERN, I thought that, wow, people know so much, and I also know to get to learn everything and know how to do everything on my own. But it's actually not needed. This is a bit related to what Patricia said. I think it's important that you understand what is your strength. And then it's much more efficient to collaborate with people that have other strengths, and then together you're much stronger. And this was true as a PhD, but also now being convener of germ physics in LHC, for example, there's so much analysis going on that I know there are people that know more about certain topics than I do. So I chose a team of sub-conveners where now I can rely on them. And then together we are much stronger than a single person.
Thank you. Eluned.
Yeah, so 2 points which maybe haven't been covered. So for the PhD, one thing I think it would have been good to know is that, some of the skills that make for a very efficient PhD don't have to be, or aren't necessarily some of the skills that will then bring you success later. So, for PhD, obviously, if you can write code very quickly, get your job sent off, get those results back, that's great. But there's less value given to, like, if you're good at kind of big problem solving, seeing the big picture, getting, organizing stuff, get papers out quickly, people skills, these are all things which actually, in my experience, were valued a lot more during my postdoc phase, actually. So, there's change, there can be, depending on what kind of career path you take, kind of different skills which are valued depending on, which part of your career you're at. And the second point with postdocs I wanted to say is that with parent positions, don't apply. Basically apply, because I didn't apply for a long time. I hadn't realized that I could apply. I didn't think that I could yet somehow, so I self-censored. And it wasn't until people told me that I should be applying to positions that I started to apply. And then, my first couple of interviews weren't great, but by the time, then you have a bit of practice, and then, yeah. So, yeah, apply to parent positions. Which may be an obvious thing, but, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Erica.
Yeah, so my advice is to avoid to work non-stop, to avoid not to have weekend, not to have evenings, because at least as a personal experience, I find that when I do that, I am at the end of the month much less efficient. If I kind of take breaks and encapsulate the problem, then I come back with more energy and actually with a different prospect that maybe I didn't think about it before. So yeah, I know it's difficult because everyone loves their job and loves what we are doing, and in our field it's a bit complicated to do that, but that would be my advice.
Good advice, thank you. Fernando.
Yeah, so I guess something that I wish I had known prior to finishing the PhD was just how quickly time elapses, because the entire experience, looking back at it, went by very, very quickly. So I guess like my advice is enjoy it while you're still in it. Being a student is just such a beautiful experience. So don't really get consumed in all of the stress. And I guess also to mirror what Erica was saying, don't forget to worry about your personal health and especially your mental health, as well as the relationships that you're building outside of your job, because those are some things that are just equally as important. So don't lose focus on the big picture of life.
Thank you. Patricia.
There's a lot of good advice here. I think the thing I wrote down was already said, which was, you don't have to know everything. It took me a while because I worked on a small experiment when I came into working on a LEP experiment we had 110 people working on building the muon system. And it took me a long time to realize that even the head of the group didn't know everything about what was in the detector when we were done with it. And it was for me a comforting and made me feel like more of an expert than I did before, where I felt like I always had to learn one more thing, and it was very, very helpful for me. The other is to, well, I was going to say question everything, but that's really not, that has to be done politely. But when you're taking on an analysis, when you're taking on a project, think about why it is you're doing it and think about it in the broader context. And maybe you can bring something to the project that other people may not have thought of before. And so if you have questions, bring them up and make sure that you're happy with the answers. And then I guess finally is when you're thinking about what you're doing next in your next job, the next position, find a place where you feel like you can make a difference, where what you're bringing is really going to have an impact.
Thank you. And finally, Sourav.
Great points here. So what I'll add is, yes, it's already said, but just talk to people, talk to people within collaborations who are postdocs, like for PhDs, talk to postdocs, how their experiences are, what they work on. And also talk to people outside your field, so that and try to explain what you do. So this not only prepares you for if you want to sort of interview outside the field, or at times even in the field, but also make connections, and more importantly, for you to decide whether you want to do what you are planning to do or not. So just to make an informed decision, it's good to talk to broader people from different backgrounds, different fields, and enjoy what you do and take breaks. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, we can close the main panel discussion. It's time for your break, but allow me to just keep you for 1 minute to firstly thank you to all the panelists for agreeing to take their time and to share their experiences. I think it's been really interesting discussion. Now have the breakout rooms, so I really encourage you to attend the breakout rooms. You can find the links on the Indico page and continue this discussion and ask some more questions. So we will be back in the breakout rooms in 10 minutes.